John sat at his desk, staring blankly at the computer screen, his mind racing with doubts and questions. For weeks he had sensed something off with her, a subtle shift in behavior that he couldn't quite pinpoint. She was more distant, her eyes frequently darting away when they spoke, her phone always kept close and facing down. John's suspicions gnawed at him, creating a storm of anxiety and uncertainty. It was a typical Monday morning when John received the email that changed everything. One of her disgruntled colleagues, someone John barely knew, had reached out with a cryptic message. "You need to know what's really going on. She's not who she pretends to be." Attached were several documents and photos that painted a grim picture of deceit and betrayal. John felt a surge of anger and hurt. He knew he had to confront her, but he also knew he needed a plan. Acting on impulse would only make things worse. He spent hours poring over the information, his mind racing as he tried to piece together the puzzle of her double life. He realized he needed to stay calm, control his emotions, and wait for the right moment to address the situation. That evening he went home with a heavy heart. He watched her closely, noting every small detail and inconsistency. The way she avoided eye contact, her forced laughter, the subtle tension in her movements. He knew he had to gather more evidence before making his move. He couldn't let his emotions get the best of him. Days turned into weeks as John carefully crafted his plan. He controlled his anger, channeling it into a meticulous strategy. He began to document everything, collecting texts, emails, and phone records. He needed to be thorough and precise. There could be no room for doubt when the time came to confront her. John spent countless nights lying awake, his mind replaying every interaction, every conversation, looking for clues he might have missed. He became hyper-aware of her actions, her words, her tone. He began to notice patterns and inconsistencies, each one fueling his determination to uncover the truth. Finally, the night arrived. John had planned everything meticulously. Dinner was prepared, a facade of normalcy maintained, but beneath the surface a storm was brewing. He knew that tonight would be the night everything changed. He was ready to confront her, to lay bare the truth and demand answers. His heart pounded with anticipation and dread, knowing that once he opened this door, there would be no turning back. Sarah paced her apartment, her mind racing with excitement and anxiety. She had confided in her closest friend, Emily, about her plan, and now the moment was fast approaching. Sarah had spent weeks preparing for this, every detail meticulously planned. She had rehearsed the conversation in her mind countless times. But now that the moment was almost here, she couldn't help but feel a surge of nerves. Emily had been a pillar of support throughout the entire process. They had spent hours discussing every possible scenario, every potential reaction Paul might have. Emily's advice had been invaluable, helping Sarah to stay grounded and focused. "Just remember to stay strong," Emily had told her. "He won't like it, but you have to be firm." Sarah had played out the conversation in her mind repeatedly, visualizing every detail. She knew Paul would be upset, but she believed in the strength of their relationship. She was confident that with time, he would come to understand and accept her decision. "If he truly loves me, he'll accept this for my happiness," she had told Emily, trying to reassure herself as much as her friend. The evening approached, and Sarah felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. She knew that this conversation would be a turning point in their relationship. She had spent hours preparing, crafting the perfect meal, and setting the stage for the discussion. She wanted everything to be perfect, to minimize any potential conflict. Emily had reminded her to stay calm and firm, to let Paul have his outburst if necessary. "He'll eventually realize you're in charge," Emily had said. "Just stay calm and let him process it. He'll come around." Sarah had clung to these words, using them as a mantra to steady her nerves. Sarah glanced at her phone, checking the time. The moment was drawing closer. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach. She had to stay strong, for her own sake and for the future of their relationship. She believed that this temporary change would ultimately strengthen their bond, allowing them to grow and evolve together. As the clock ticked down, Sarah reviewed her plan once more. She had everything she needed: the right words, the right setting, and the unwavering support of her friend. She was ready to take this bold step, confident that it was the right choice for her happiness and their future. The evening had arrived, and Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she prepared Paul's favorite meal. She moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, her mind focused on the task at hand. Every detail had to be perfect, every element just right. She wanted to create a calm and comfortable atmosphere, a setting that would help ease the tension of the conversation to come. Paul arrived home, his usual cheerful self. He greeted Sarah with his customary "I love you" and a kiss on the cheek. Sarah smiled, though her mind was racing with the weight of what she was about to reveal. She had rehearsed this moment countless times, but now that it was here, the reality of it felt overwhelming. They sat down to dinner, engaging in their usual light-hearted conversation. Sarah forced herself to stay present, to focus on the moment. She needed to maintain the facade of normalcy, to keep Paul relaxed and unsuspecting. Her heart raced with anticipation and fear, knowing that everything would change once she spoke her truth. After dinner, Sarah insisted that Paul grab a beer and relax while she cleaned up. She needed a few more moments to gather her thoughts, to steady her nerves. She moved methodically through the kitchen, washing dishes and putting everything in its place. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, but she forced herself to stay calm and focused. Finally, with everything in order, Sarah poured herself a glass of wine and joined Paul in the living room. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the fluttering in her stomach. This was it. The moment of truth. She sat down next to him, her hands trembling slightly as she took a sip of wine. "Paul, honey, we need to talk," she began, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Paul looked at her, curiosity and concern mingling in his eyes. "Sure, about what?" he asked, his tone gentle and attentive. Sarah took another deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "This might be hard for you to accept, but I need to do this for my happiness," she said, her voice firm and resolute. "Please remember it's only temporary." Paul listened, his expression shifting from curiosity to confusion. "Okay, if it's that important to you, I'll support you," he replied, though his tone held a note of uncertainty. Sarah continued, explaining her need to explore before settling down completely, her desire to see other men for a while. As Sarah spoke, she watched Paul's reaction closely. His face remained calm, though she could see the tension building in his eyes. He listened in silence, processing her words, trying to understand. When she finished, there was a long moment of silence between them, the weight of her revelation hanging heavily in the air. "Well, you don't seem to be asking for my permission, so I assume you've made up your mind," Paul finally said, his voice calm but firm. "I'd like to go on record saying I'm not in favor, but you're a grown woman." "I won't stop you." Sarah felt a surge of relief and apprehension. He hadn't raised his voice or stormed out, but she knew this was just the beginning. They continued to talk, discussing the practicalities of their new arrangement. Paul laid out his conditions, his voice steady but tinged with a hint of resignation. Sarah listened, agreeing to his terms, knowing that this was a crucial step in their journey. She felt a mixture of relief and anxiety, knowing that the hardest part was yet to come. As the conversation drew to a close, Sarah felt a strange sense of calm. They had crossed a significant threshold, and there was no turning back. She knew that this was just the beginning of a long and challenging journey, but she was determined to see it through. She believed in the strength of their relationship, and she was willing to fight for their future. The evening ended with a sense of uneasy peace. Paul moved into the spare room, and Sarah lay awake, her mind racing with the events of the night. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but she felt a sense of resolve. She had taken the first step, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The moment of truth had arrived, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she took her seat next to Paul in the living room. She tried to steady her breathing, clutching her glass of wine with trembling hands. Paul was relaxed, sipping his beer, unaware of the bombshell about to drop. "Paul, honey, we need to talk," Sarah began, her voice quivering slightly despite her efforts to stay calm. Paul turned to her, his brow furrowing in concern. He set his beer down, giving her his full attention. The sincerity in his eyes made her heart ache, but she knew there was no turning back now. "This might be hard for you to accept," Sarah continued, her voice gaining a bit of strength as she spoke, "but I need to do this for my happiness. Please remember, it's only temporary." She paused, taking a deep breath to steady herself. Paul remained silent, his eyes searching hers for some clue to the turmoil she was feeling. "I need to explore a bit before we settle down completely," she said, choosing her words carefully. "I'll be seeing other men for a while. We'll still be together. But I need this time to clear my head. It's just physical with them. You have my heart." The words hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. Paul sat back, his expression a mix of shock and confusion. "Well, you don't seem to be asking for my permission, so I assume you've made up your mind," Paul finally said, his voice remarkably calm. "I'd like to go on record saying I'm not in favor, but you're a grown woman." "I won't stop you." Sarah nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. She had expected anger, maybe even a shouting match, but his calm acceptance was more unsettling in a way. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. Paul finally broke the silence, his voice tinged with resignation. "So, how will this work? Are you moving out, or do you expect me to?" Sarah shook her head, grateful for his willingness to discuss the logistics. "We'll both stay here," she said, her voice steadying. "When I bring someone over, you'll sleep in the spare room. No need for a hotel." Paul nodded slowly, processing her words. "I'm not in favor, but we shouldn't have lovemaking during this. I won't risk STDs. Once you're done, we'll wait until you're tested and cleared." "Fair enough," Sarah agreed, feeling a sense of relief that he was setting boundaries. "I might bring someone back tomorrow night. Since we won't be intimate during this time, it might be best if you move into the spare room for the next couple of months." Paul nodded again, his face impassive. "Okay, I'll move in by the time you get home tomorrow night." With that, the conversation was over. Sarah felt a strange mixture of emotions: relief that the conversation had gone better than she had feared, and anxiety about what the future held. She watched Paul get up and head to the bedroom, his shoulders slumped in a way that made her heart ache. She knew this was just the beginning of a long and difficult journey. That night, Sarah lay awake in bed, her mind racing. She replayed the conversation with Paul over and over, analyzing every word, every expression. She felt a pang of guilt for hurting him, but she also felt a sense of resolve. This was something she needed to do for herself, and she hoped that in time, Paul would understand. The next morning, Paul was already up when Sarah woke. He was in the kitchen, making coffee and reading the newspaper, his face a mask of calm. Sarah approached him cautiously, unsure of how to navigate this new dynamic. "Good morning," she said softly, hoping to gauge his mood. Paul looked up and gave her a small, tight-lipped smile. "Morning," he replied, his tone neutral. They went through their morning routine in relative silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Sarah could feel the tension between them, but she hoped that with time, things would settle into a new normal. Throughout the day, Sarah couldn't help but think about Paul. She wondered how he was really feeling, if he was hiding his true emotions behind a calm exterior. She hoped he would open up to her, but she also knew that he needed time to process everything. She tried to stay focused on her work, but her mind kept drifting back to their conversation. When she got home that evening, Paul had already moved his things into the spare room. Sarah felt a pang of sadness as she walked into their bedroom, now half empty. She missed him already, but she knew this was the right decision for her. She just hoped that Paul would eventually see that too. The following days were a blur of emotions. Sarah started seeing other men as she had planned, but each encounter left her feeling more confused and uncertain. She found herself comparing them to Paul, realizing how much she missed his presence, his touch, his love. She began to question if this was really what she wanted, but she felt trapped by her own decisions. Paul, on the other hand, seemed to be holding up remarkably well. He went about his daily routine with a calm and steady demeanor, never showing any signs of distress. Sarah couldn't tell if he was truly okay or if he was just hiding his pain. She wanted to reach out to him, to reassure him that she still loved him, but she didn't know how. One evening, Sarah came home late from a date and found Paul sitting in the living room reading a book. He looked up as she walked in, his eyes meeting hers for a brief moment before he looked away. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. "How was your evening?" Paul asked, his voice casual but with an undercurrent of tension. "It was fine," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She wanted to tell him more, to share her thoughts and feelings, but she couldn't find the words. They sat in silence for a while, the unspoken tension between them growing heavier with each passing moment. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah began to notice subtle changes in Paul. He became more withdrawn, spending more time alone in the spare room or out of the house. He stopped asking about her dates, and their conversations grew increasingly sparse. Sarah felt a growing sense of dread, fearing that she was losing him for good. One night, Sarah decided to confront Paul. She found him in the spare room, reading a book. She took a deep breath and knocked on the doorframe. "Paul, can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling. Paul looked up, his expression unreadable. He set the book aside and nodded. "Sure, what's on your mind?" Sarah sat down on the edge of the bed, her heart pounding in her chest. "I miss you," she said softly, her eyes welling up with tears. "I know this has been hard, and I want you to know that I still love you. I don't know what to do anymore." Paul's expression softened, and he reached out to take her hand. "I miss you too, Sarah," he said, his voice gentle. "But this is something you needed to do, and I respect that. I just hope that in the end we'll be stronger for it." With a heavy heart, Paul moved his things into the spare room. The sight of his half-empty closet and dresser drawers was a stark reminder of the distance that now lay between them. Sarah felt a wave of sadness wash over her, but she knew this was necessary for the path she had chosen. She watched as Paul methodically organized his new space, his movements deliberate and precise. The first night in their new arrangement was strange and uncomfortable. Sarah lay awake in their once shared bed, feeling the vast emptiness beside her. She missed the warmth of Paul's body, the sound of his breathing, the comfort of his presence. The silence of the house seemed to amplify her loneliness, and she found herself questioning her decision once again. Paul, in his new room, felt a similar sense of disorientation. The spare room, which had always been a guest room, now felt foreign and unwelcoming. He lay on the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with thoughts and emotions. He missed Sarah, missed their late-night conversations, and the simple comfort of being close to her. But he was determined to honor her wishes, to give her the space she needed. As the days turned into weeks, they began to settle into their new routine. Sarah continued to see other men, trying to find the clarity she sought. Each encounter was different, some exciting, others disappointing, but none compared to what she had with Paul. She felt a growing sense of frustration and confusion, unable to find the fulfillment she had hoped for. Paul, meanwhile, threw himself into his work and hobbies, trying to distract himself from the pain of their separation. He spent more time at the gym, took up new projects around the house, and reconnected with old friends. On the surface, he seemed to be coping well, but inside he was struggling. He missed Sarah deeply and found it increasingly difficult to accept their new reality. Despite the tension, they maintained a semblance of normalcy. They continued to share meals and occasional conversations, but the intimacy they once had was gone. Their interactions were polite but distant, a constant reminder of the rift between them. Sarah felt a pang of guilt every time she saw the sadness in Paul's eyes, but she was determined to see her plan through. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, Sarah found herself sitting alone in the living room, a glass of wine in hand. She stared at the empty space where Paul used to sit, her heart heavy with regret. She thought about the life they had built together, the dreams they had shared, and the love that had once seemed unbreakable. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized how much she had lost. Paul walked in, sensing her distress. He sat down beside her, his presence a comforting reminder of the bond they still shared. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle and concerned. Sarah nodded, unable to find the words to express the turmoil inside her. She leaned into him, seeking solace in his familiar embrace. They sat in silence for a long time, the weight of their unspoken feelings hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Paul spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I love you, Sarah. No matter what happens, I want you to know that." Sarah felt a surge of emotion, her heart aching with love and sorrow. She knew she had hurt him deeply, but his words reminded her of the strength of their bond. As the weeks went by, they began to find a new rhythm. Paul continued to respect Sarah's need for space, while Sarah started to reevaluate her choices. She realized that the clarity she sought might not come from being with other men, but from understanding herself and her relationship with Paul. She began to see that true happiness might lie in rebuilding what they had lost, rather than seeking something new. Their new arrangement, while difficult, forced them to confront their feelings and communicate more honestly. They had long, heartfelt conversations about their fears, hopes, and dreams. They began to understand each other in ways they hadn't before, finding a deeper connection through their struggles. One night, after a particularly emotional conversation, Sarah made a decision. She walked into the spare room where Paul was reading and sat down beside him. "I think I'm ready to end this experiment," she said, her voice steady and sincere. "I miss us, and I want to work on rebuilding our relationship." Paul looked at her, his eyes filled with relief and hope. He reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I've missed you too, Sarah. Let's take it one step at a time and see where it leads us." Sarah nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She knew they had a long road ahead, but she was ready to face it together. As the weeks went by, Sarah began to sense a growing distance between herself and Paul. Despite their agreement and the calm way he had initially reacted, there was a palpable tension in the air. Paul became more withdrawn, spending long hours at work and finding excuses to stay away from home. He rarely spoke to her about his feelings, and Sarah found it increasingly difficult to bridge the gap that was forming between them. Sarah's escapades with other men did not bring her the clarity she had hoped for. Instead, they left her feeling more confused and conflicted. She missed the connection she had with Paul, and each encounter only highlighted the depth of her emotional bond with him. The excitement she had anticipated was overshadowed by a growing sense of guilt and unease. One day at work, Sarah received an unexpected visit from a colleague. The woman handed her an envelope, her expression unreadable. Inside were divorce papers citing infidelity as the reason. Sarah felt her heart drop. She had known this was a possibility, but seeing the cold, hard documents made the reality hit home. She was being accused of violating the company's moral code, and the implications were severe. The news spread quickly among her co-workers. Whispers and sideways glances followed her wherever she went. Her boss called her into his office, his face stern and unforgiving. He laid out the situation clearly. The lawsuit threatened the company's reputation, and her actions were deemed unprofessional and unacceptable. Sarah felt her career slipping through her fingers, the future she had worked so hard for now hanging by a thread. Despite the professional turmoil, Sarah's personal life was in even greater disarray. Paul had become a ghost in their home, barely speaking to her, his eyes always distant and cold. The man she had once shared everything with now seemed like a stranger. The realization that she might lose him forever was a weight she could hardly bear. Desperate to salvage something from the wreckage, Sarah decided to reach out to Paul. She composed an email, pouring her heart into every word. She apologized for the pain she had caused, expressed her regret for the decisions she had made, and begged for his forgiveness. She knew it was a long shot, but she had to try. Days passed without a response. Sarah checked her email obsessively, each time feeling a stab of disappointment and fear. She confided in her friend Emily, who tried to reassure her that Paul just needed time. But the longer the silence stretched, the more Sarah felt the crushing weight of her mistakes. One morning, Sarah's phone buzzed with a new email notification. Her heart raced as she saw Paul's name. With trembling hands, she opened the message. Paul's response was brief and formal, acknowledging her apology but offering no promise of reconciliation. He stated that he needed more time to think and asked for space to process everything. Sarah felt a mix of relief and despair. At least he had responded, but his words left her uncertain and anxious about the future. She realized that the road to healing their relationship would be long and fraught with challenges, but for now, all she could do was wait and hope. 2 years passed, marked by struggles and slow progress. Sarah and Paul had managed to find a fragile truce, but the scars of their past were far from healed. Sarah had faced the consequences of her actions, both professionally and personally. She had lost her job and had to rebuild her career from scratch, taking on lower-paying positions and working tirelessly to regain her footing. Paul, too, had changed. The once easygoing and affectionate man was now more guarded and distant. Their interactions were polite but lacked the warmth and intimacy they once shared. Despite the challenges, Sarah was determined to make amends and prove to Paul that she was committed to their relationship. One evening, Sarah decided to take a bold step. She waited for Paul to come home from work, her heart pounding with anticipation. As he walked through the door, she greeted him with a nervous smile. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice wavering slightly. Paul nodded, setting down his briefcase and following her into the living room. They sat down, and Sarah took a deep breath. "I know things have been difficult between us, and I want you to know how sorry I am for everything. I've been working on myself and trying to understand why I made those choices. I want to rebuild our relationship, but I know it won't be easy." Paul listened, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "I appreciate your honesty, Sarah. I've seen the effort you've been making, and I do believe you're sincere. But trust is not something that can be rebuilt overnight. It will take time, and we both need to be patient." Sarah nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. "I understand, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I love you, Paul, and I don't want to lose you." Paul reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I love you too, Sarah. Let's take this one step at a time and see where it leads us." From that moment on, they made a conscious effort to communicate more openly and honestly. They attended couples therapy, where they could express their feelings and work through their issues with the help of a professional. It was a slow and often painful process, but gradually they began to reconnect on a deeper level. Sarah made a point of being more present and attentive in their daily lives. She cooked meals for them, planned little surprises, and made sure to express her appreciation for Paul. She wanted to show him that she was committed to their future and that she valued him above all else. Paul, in turn, began to open up more about his own feelings and fears. He shared the hurt and betrayal he had felt, but also his hope for the future. They started to rebuild the trust that had been shattered piece by piece through their shared efforts and dedication. Their relationship was far from perfect, but they were making progress. They began to find joy in the small moments again, like taking walks together, watching movies, and simply talking about their day. These moments of connection helped to strengthen their bond and remind them of why they had fallen in love in the first place. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Paul turned to Sarah with a thoughtful expression. "I've been thinking a lot about us and where we go from here," he said. "I know we've come a long way, but there's still a lot of work to be done. I want us to move forward, but we need to set some ground rules to make sure we don't fall back into old patterns. Sarah nodded, her heart racing with a mix of hope and anxiety. I agree. What do you have in mind? Paul took a deep breath. First, we need to continue with therapy. It's been helpful, and I think it will be crucial for our long-term healing. Second, we need to be completely honest with each other, no matter how difficult it may be. No more secrets or hiding our true feelings. Sarah agreed wholeheartedly. Absolutely. I want us to be transparent with each other. Paul continued, we need to prioritize our relationship. That means making time for each other, even when life gets busy. We need to keep the spark alive and not take each other for granted. Sarah smiled, feeling a surge of optimism. I couldn't agree more. Let's make a commitment to each other and to our future. With their new agreement in place, Sarah and Paul began to work diligently on their relationship. They continued therapy sessions, where they delved deeper into their issues and learned new ways to communicate effectively. They also made a conscious effort to spend quality time together, planning date nights and weekend getaways to reconnect and strengthen their bond. Sarah found a new job that she was passionate about, and Paul supported her every step of the way. They celebrated each other's successes and provided comfort during difficult times. The trust that had been shattered was slowly being rebuilt, and they both felt a renewed sense of hope for their future. One night, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Paul turned to Sarah with a serious expression. There's something I need to ask you, he said. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. What is it? Paul took her hand in his, looking deeply into her eyes. Will you marry me again? I want to renew our vows and start fresh. I believe in us, and I want to reaffirm my commitment to you. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she nodded. Yes, Paul, I will marry you again. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy. They embraced, both feeling a profound sense of joy and relief. They began to plan a small, intimate ceremony with close family and friends, a celebration of their renewed love and commitment. It was a turning point in their relationship, a symbol of their resilience and determination to build a stronger, more loving partnership. The day of their vow renewal ceremony arrived, and Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had spent weeks preparing, wanting everything to be perfect. As she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her dress, she couldn't help but reflect on the journey they had been through. Paul entered the room, dressed in a sharp suit, and Sarah's heart swelled with love. He looked at her with such tenderness and pride, and she knew that they had made the right decision. They had faced their challenges head-on and come out stronger on the other side. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with heartfelt vows and tears of joy. As they stood before their loved ones, exchanging promises once again, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude. They had been through so much, but their love had endured. They had learned to appreciate each other in new ways, to cherish the moments they shared, and to always strive for a better future. After the ceremony, they celebrated with their family and friends, enjoying a night of laughter, dancing, and love. It was a night to remember, a testament to their resilience and the strength of their bond. As the evening drew to a close, Paul and Sarah found a quiet moment alone, reflecting on their journey. We've come a long way, Paul said, his voice filled with emotion. I couldn't have done it without you. Sarah smiled, her eyes shining with tears. And I couldn't have done it without you. We've both grown so much, and I'm so grateful for the life we have together. They embraced, feeling a deep sense of contentment and peace. They knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges, but they were ready to face them together. They had proven that their love was strong enough to withstand anything, and they were committed to nurturing it every day. As they walked hand in hand, heading back to their home, they felt a renewed sense of purpose and joy. They had built a life filled with love, trust, and understanding. They had learned to communicate openly, to support each other unconditionally, and to always strive for a better future. Their journey had not been easy, but it had been worth it. They had faced their fears, overcome their challenges, and emerged stronger and more in love than ever before. They knew that their love was a work in progress, something to be nurtured and cherished every day, and they were ready to face the future, hand in hand, with hope and determination. Sarah and Paul continued to grow and evolve together, always striving to be the best partners they could be. They celebrated their successes, supported each other through difficult times, and never took their love for granted. Their journey was a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the strength of the human spirit. As the years went by, they built a life filled with joy, laughter, and love. They raised their children with the same values they had learned through their own journey, teaching them the importance of honesty, trust, and unconditional love. They cherished every moment they shared, always grateful for the second chance they had been given. Their love story was a reminder that even in the face of adversity, love can endure and flourish. It was a story of redemption, growth, and the unbreakable bond between two people who were committed to each other. They had faced their challenges with courage and emerged stronger and more in love than ever before. And as they looked towards the future, they knew that their love would continue to grow, bringing them closer together with each passing day. They had built a life filled with love, trust, and happiness, and they were ready to face whatever the future held together. Thank you for watching this emotional roller coaster of love, betrayal, and redemption. Sarah and Paul's journey is a testament to the complexities of relationships and the resilience needed to overcome the toughest challenges. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories, and let us know in the comments what you thought about Sarah and Paul's journey. They had learned to communicate openly, to support each other unconditionally, and to always strive for a better future. Their journey had not been easy, but it had been worth it. They had faced their fears, overcome their challenges, and emerged stronger and more in love than ever before. They knew that their love was a work in progress, something to be nurtured and cherished every day. And they were ready to face the future hand in hand with hope and determination. Sarah and Paul continued to grow and evolve together, always striving to be the best partners they could be. They celebrated their successes, supported each other through difficult times, and never took their love for granted. Their journey was a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the strength of the human spirit. As the years went by, they built a life filled with joy, laughter, and love. They raised their children with the same values they had learned through their own journey, teaching them the importance of honesty, trust, and unconditional love. They cherished every moment they shared, always grateful for the second chance they had been given. Their love story was a reminder that even in the face of adversity, love can endure and flourish. It was a story of redemption, growth, and the unbreakable bond between two people who were committed to each other. They had faced their challenges with courage and emerged stronger and more in love than ever before. And as they looked towards the future, they knew that their love would continue to grow, bringing them closer together with each passing day. They had built a life filled with love, trust, and happiness, and they were ready to face whatever the future held together. Thank you for watching this emotional roller coaster of love, betrayal, and redemption. Sarah and Paul's journey is a testament to the complexities of relationships and the resilience needed to overcome the toughest challenges. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories, and let us know in the comments what you thought about Sarah and Paul's journey.